So thank you so much for joining us. I'm Pete Burden, and I'm your host today on the Healthy Power Alliance podcast. We're using this space to explore what it means to be powerful together. We're looking at human power, and particularly as it appears in organizations and communities. And we're interested in how that can actually benefit other humans and the planet we all depend upon. We're speaking to people who are in the middle of doing that, working in organizations and dealing with power, people who think they know how to do it, and people who are doing kind of in-depth academic studies of what works and probably what doesn't as well. And we love theory, but we're more interested in practice. So all of that said, let's get into the detail with our current guest, who is Matt Scott from Thames Life. And I'll let Matt explain what Thames Life is in just a minute. In fact, maybe you could do that now, Matt. Do you want to say a little bit about what Thames Life is? And
Sure. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. So Thames Life is a charity. It's a community development trust, which is based in East London, in a couple of estates, primarily in Barking and Dagenham, which is sort of Thames View, Barking Riverside, sort of south the A13 on the river, and it's really where they're building a new town, lots of housing units, possibly the most in Europe going on collectively
Uh-huh.
across the borough. So it's really about how residents can drive that change, benefit, shape, influence, lead it as much as possible. So yeah, that's what Thames Life's there to do.
Right. And I remember visiting that area with you before the pandemic, so some years ago. And as you said, it was a kind of huge development even at that time and growing massively. And what's your role in the organization?
Well, I'm Chief Exec. I see it as community work. So sometimes I just say I'm a community worker, keep it
Uh-huh.
simple. But yeah, I started the project in 2017. Now we've got sort of 6 or 7 staff. I'm the only one who doesn't live locally, and a resident board as well. So yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's us.
And you've also had kind of other roles, haven't you, in the past? You worked at Goldsmiths, I think, for example.
Yeah, yeah. So I teach at Goldsmiths on their masters, which is kind of anthropology, youth work, community work, arts. Done a little bit of teaching at London Met, a few other places, and yeah, I saw community work. It's a fairly varied career. I've worked at a national level with Community Sector Coalition, like Pan London organisations, other stuff really. So basically, what I've been doing since a long time ago. So yeah,
Well,
as yeah.
I was going to say, it's funny, whenever I hear the words kind of community work, it kind of, they're not the biggest kind of terms in terms of, like capitalized letters, perhaps.
Mm,
So it might sound quite small in some ways, but I've known you for a while, and the reason I so wanted to get you here today was because you have really in-depth knowledge of kind of community development and what's actually involved in that, and and how the people are involved in that. So I really wanted to get your kind of insights into that, as you said, over a long period of time, and also a little, you've also got this academic background looking at how that works as well. So I'd love to go and talk about all of that if we can, and particularly focus on the power and the practice. I also just wanted to add that we know that power itself is a highly contested term. So we're using this very simple definition rather than get into the kind of academic debate
mm,
about what
mm,
power is. And the simple definition is the ability to accomplish goals or maybe get needs met. So
mm,
that's power. And then healthy power is when you do that in a way which actually increases other people's power. And maybe toxic power is when you do that and you do that at the expense of other people or something like that. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, but so can you just say a little bit about, when you first, maybe what led you into community work? I don't know, but when did you first realize that power was important, that it matters?
Um, I think we, when we're growing up, we cannot but be aware of power, how we feel in the world, how we respond to challenges. So in some ways, I think there couldn't have been a time when I wasn't, to some extent, aware of power.
Yeah.
And if we think about what it was like to go to school, for example, we've all pretty much had that experience. And sometimes that could be quite isolating. Sometimes it could be the joy of friendship. You have authority figures. So I guess I go all the way back
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
that. But I had sort of social science background, and I was kind of interested in politics, philosophy, that sort of stuff. And you have these very grand narratives, social contracts, and the idea that government has agency, and these dead economists that somehow still rule the world, with their ideas and that kind of thing. But I think when I was younger, I did a lot of stuff like workers' co-ops and things, and sort of signed on and kind of took my time in life, really. And I just realized that the stuff that I was reading in books didn't really have much purchase on the very local, the stuff that I was seeing. And when I did get a job, I did lots of voluntary work, and lots of welfare rights advice, and that led to community work, regeneration, etc. I think what's real is the conversations that we have with each other, and street by street, and the cross on the box every 4 or 5 years is less real,
Hmm.
and so on.
Hmm.
But we're kind of treating some of the big narratives and around us as if they were more real than they are, perhaps. And what we have
Hmm.
agency on is what's in front of us.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yeah, and I just found joy in doing community work. Really, I found it meaningful. So I'm not, probably like most people, I'm not very good at doing things I don't find meaningful. So that was my kind of benchmark. And when you look into the interaction of residents and communities with power holders, with services, it's really interesting. I mean, it's quite frustrating. People talk about system change and all that kind of thing,
Hmm.
as if the system maybe can change itself, which is debatable.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Okay, there's so much in here I want to kind of pursue. That's great. Before we come back to some of those things, I mean, on power itself, are there things that you think that we then misunderstand about power? Is that part of what you're saying, that it's a big narrative and important people kind of run it or something? What do you think?
yeah, I think. I mean, I absolutely love talking about power, so this is right up my street.
Great.
I think power is a little bit of a taboo word. I
Hmm.
think you say it, and then, like, quite often people are not comfortable with it, and that's interesting. Maybe it's rather
Hmm.
like religion and politics, and we're not supposed to go there, kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I liked your definitions. The way you broke it down as maybe the ability to choose to achieve goals, to get stuff done,
Hmm.
and also can we make it healthy? And I think health is a wonderful concept. It's so broad, but we know again what it means to be in healthy relationship with each other and our world,
Hmm.
and also we know when it's not, when it's toxic. So my thing is, I don't want to rarefy it too much. I just want to keep it simple. Like,
Hmm.
how do we get stuff done? And how we get stuff done needs to feel right. It needs to feel like it was initiated uh, with ourselves. That we all have power, we all have leadership, we all have
Hmm.
resources. But I think at a community level, how do we pull those things together?
Hmm.
So I work with Citizens UK, for example, and I do community organising, and they have a particular take on all of this stuff, really, which is, larger organisations, councils, and developers have money power, the power of money. And
Hmm.
because they're bureaucracies and hierarchies, they have organised people. So organised money and organised people tends to get stuff done, whereas the community has not much money. In Barking and Dagenham, it's one of the poorest boroughs in the country, so doesn't have money power, and it also has disorganised people. Really, there isn't civil society as an ecosystem. Isn't about command and control. Isn't about you have to do this or else. That's not going to fly. So we need a different kind of relational power, the power of relationships. And if we don't consciously try and vision what that is and how it feels and how we do it, then we're simply going to be following other people's agendas by default. Yeah.
Thank you. This is great. I mean, you said feelings. The word feelings quite a lot, which is interesting. And you said feels right. I thought as well, which was interesting. But yeah, there's so much here. And I think, I mean, I clearly, coming at it in the same way as you, that it's about kind of relations and how they work together. But it sounds like you're drawing a distinction between the relations that exist in a body that has money and kind of formal organization, and then the relations that happen in an organization where it's more on the ground and there isn't money. Could you say a little bit about how you actually then go about creating organization where there isn't any and where there isn't any money? If
Yeah.
is that what you're doing? I mean, you're building relations. I thought I heard you say.
Yeah, that's basically it. It's the power of relationships with people that will achieve things in the community. So how do we do it? I think what we try and do is just get people in the room to have a conversation, really. So keeping it really simple. What is the true word that people want to speak to each other, whether it's on the school gate, in their place of worship or tenant hall or whatever? People are having reflective conversations about the world all the time. Why is it that they've blocked the road again? Why is it that the rent's gone up, the service charge, etc.? So we're constantly engaging and talking about our world. And I think there needs to be a process of people coming together to have that conversation with each other, so that they can think about, okay, what is the consensus and what are we going to do about it, really? But that needs to feel relational, and that there's a certain amount of trust. So it can't just be venting, because that ends up being quite, confirming the disempowerment, really. So yeah, we look to bring people together in different ways, as informal as possible, to talk about what sometimes we say, what makes you angry? And that's, again, rather like power, quite provocative. But we also understand anger to be, the citizens' thing, anger as love that is grieving for a world that as it is rather than as it should be. So, anger is about perhaps a sense of loss, not hot anger, but kind of, that. And, there's a lot of, really kind of trauma, really. I mean, to get a bit deep about it, but in the community, we're living with the effects of the pandemic, etc., as well. So I think it's really about people getting into relationship with each other, talking about what is their self-interest or their issue that they want to move on. And then I think people are natural problem solvers. I really do. I think we do this all the time. We're constantly in relationship with the world. We're constantly figuring stuff out. We're constantly having conversations with people. It's not complicated. But I think we do need to sometimes hold each other to account a little bit. We need to support, and we need to kind of pace and structure what it is we're going to do. So for me, we're back office support, and we would look at typically, issues. It could be like the environment. Why is our nature reserve closed? No good reason. Let's get it open. Why have we not got a health centre? It's ridiculous. We've got the highest rates of mortality in London, and yet we still don't have a health centre on Riverside. That's a real example, despite the thousands of people moving in. What is that about? How do we, demand change? And there's lots of things like that. So yeah, I try and keep it simple. I try and think about, who is initiating change? Who is asking the question, why this but not that? What are we going to do? Issue, solution, action. But it has to be paced in a way that is congruent. And normally with the initiation of agendas, we're going to do X. It happens on the 5th floor of a council building, or there's a computer-generated image that the developer's looking at, and that instructs it, really. So, yeah, how do we think about residents speaking their truth, and having the space to choose autonomous action that should be of benefit to everyone.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of, it's not a sectional thing. It's like, if we get this right, if residents are empowered through independent civil society, everyone gets uplifted, better
Yeah.
outcome.
Yeah. Lovely. Gosh, there's so much there that I want to talk about. I suppose, but I'm interested. Let's come at it this way. So, it sounded like you kind of you intervene in some way, meaning so. Just give us an idea of what that looks like. So you get a meeting together in a town hall or wherever it is, a space of some kind. And then is your role and your organization's role to kind of facilitate those conversations and encourage people to start talking about power, which he says is a taboo, but then start to talk about their truth. Is that the kind of work you're doing?
Yeah.
And is it all? Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay. And is it all? I mean, because the other bit I heard was that you said people are always having conversations, including at the school gates and all of that. So how do you manage the kind of the formal versus the informal settings, I suppose? I'm curious about that. Is there a way of engaging at the school gates and things too?
Yeah. I mean, this is, messy.
Yeah.
It's not there. I mean, I think one way of saying it was, when I started the job, someone put a lottery bid in and they combined this idea of community organising with social enterprise. Yeah. And the mandate I have via the Charities Commission around social regeneration, relief of poverty, and the mandate that I have from resident trustees is to make that happen. So, we have a vision of residents driving change, so not just picking up, riding the coattails of someone else's, but actually initiating and driving it themselves, and so on. So how do we do that? I just think we have to improvise effectively. I'm very skeptical about absolute toolkits. I like community organising. Citizens UK has got a certain way of going about it. I like different forms of community development, but ultimately, I'm going to try and do what works and adapt it. And I think what I rely a lot on is the leadership of local people. And I start with that assumption that, when you ask someone who's your favourite leader, they never say themselves. And you think, why not? Really? You're infinitely creative, entrepreneurial people. I just see this all the time. So don't walk into situations or behave yourself into situations where you're assuming that just because someone's got a job or a set of qualifications that, that gives them something. I mean, in some ways, sure, but actually, if you live here 24/7 with your life experiences and so on, then, that's super important. So yeah, I think we really do mix it up, Pete. We do lots of forums. We do like a weekly campaign group. So you need consistency. And I just open it up, and it's like we have speakers. We put a lot of time into ambience and relationship building. And so I've been thinking a lot about people need to feel good rather than have me bang on about planning codes and things like that. So we're trying to sort of really be intentional about the use of art and storytelling and music and food and culture and heritage. And sort of try and put a lot of time into building confidence and relationship, really, because we've got the lowest rates of democratic engagement in London, in Barking and Dagenham, and that's for a reason. We've got a really paternalistic, I would say, authoritarian council. And in fact, the developer and council are one and the same thing. So in terms of power, all of this housing units that are completely unaffordable for most people are driving people into, I guess, more hardship ultimately, just because of the structural nature in which things are happening, where the money flow of the financialisation of housing. Lots of big
Mm-hmm.
words there, but money,
Mm-hmm.
money, money.
Mm-hmm.
Put it into housing. Is it affordable? No, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Is it going to happen? Yes. And then people. I mean, the level of powerlessness amongst almost every level of council officer, councillor, and developer team is also quite marked as well.
Powerlessness within
Yeah,
those groups.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But you're
So you
also
have.
saying something about, sorry to interrupt you, about the financialization of all of this, and the impact very much on the people themselves structurally. So you mean ultimately that even if they can afford to buy somewhere, to rent somewhere, then the rents themselves are so high that then that's forcing them into a particular kind of pattern of poverty or something like that. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, there's lots of hard questions that need to be asked of ourselves as well as others. But to what extent is community work placatory,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
really
Well,
missing the point, really?
that's what I was going to ask then. So,
Mm,
given that there's all that kind of structural inequality, and
mm,
I've heard very strongly you're trying to kind of involve the community, and you've got trustees and coming from the community and all of that kind of thing. How do people, and how do you kind of understand the balance then between the kind of local power and getting together and having conversations and talking truth and these bigger kind of structural things? I mean, do you go and march on Westminster, or how do you decide where to put your efforts? I guess that's a question.
yeah, I mean, it's again sort of sense of smell.
Mm,
For me, it's about having sense-making conversations with people I work with. So whether that's trustees, staff, etc. And it's just like, for me, like the tactics might be rather like rock paper scissors. Yeah, it's like in a negotiation, do we go in hard rock?
uh-huh.
Do we you can't do that all the time. You have to let some things go, etc. So it's I think it's like mixing up one's responses and having generative questions of each other. What is the
Yes.
purpose? What are we trying to achieve? What did we notice about last time we did that stuff? I don't think I have the monopoly on any of that. I seek to learn from others about it, and I seek to have a live collective conversation with as many people as possible
Yeah.
about what we're trying to do. Did it work? How do we switch it up?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Yeah. And again, that's joyful. I think a lot of governance and strategic conversations don't really get to the point quickly enough about that, and they slightly rarefy it and say, okay, somebody's the decision maker. It's like, no, we
Yes.
can shift this stuff really quickly. And in fact, it's already in our heads because we're engaging with the world in lots of ways. So how do we verbalize this stuff to each other, even more? And yeah, we've done protests outside the town hall last year. And 4 times we were there because we were trying to save a community building that was Europe's largest maker space, believe it or not.
Wow.
Everyone every day, and the council made a decision to prioritise trying to get a financial return out of a building. It's still empty. They're having to pay for security after it got squatted, etc. And we put together a business plan. We organised on a weekly basis, trying to speak with and get a solution with the council on this one. And they just weren't prepared to do that. So we got in front of the BBC News
Mm-hmm.
with we created a coalition. So it's not just like one angry person kind of just having a pop. We had lots of residents, families, community groups there, and we did kind of quite vibrant sort of creative protest outside the town hall. And that was interesting because I think there's a lot of fear as well. So the flip side to all of this is fear, a culture of fear. And I see when we talk about toxic power, there is very much a dark side of that within organizations. And I think we have to get better at talking about it and not bystanding about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think there's something about the organizational culture, the political culture, small p, large p, that really does encourage bullying and harassment. And
Mm-hmm.
those are strong words, but we will all recognize that if we spend
Mm-hmm.
any time in professional life.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't address that, we end up having this kind of noticing but not noticing, and kind of enabling stuff. And it's not always in our gift to change everything, but I feel like my take on some of the culture of large public bodies that I work with is not healthy, and if you do call it out, then there are consequences to that as well. So, I'm lucky enough to be pretty independent, not just in my thinking, but, just because I can choose to do different things, really. But yeah, fear needs to be sort of challenged and addressed, and it becomes contagious, just as hope and other things can become contagious as well. So yeah,
Really interesting. I mean, and I love the way you kind of reframed anger earlier. I think, you described, for me, there is kind of hot anger, but there's also kind of another word might be kind of indignation that things are wrong and they need to be brought right, and we can use that anger to power things. And now you're talking about fear, which completely there with you. As you say, there are various layers of kind of fear, aren't there? How do you try and work with fear then? I mean, how do you talked about improvising, which I totally get, but how do you deal with fear then in the environment when it, as you say, it's so pervasive and it's so structural, it seems.
I mean, I haven't always dealt with it very well. So, you sometimes, if you're in extreme situations, just getting through and getting by, really. So,
Do you mean that? I mean that again. There's lots of layers to it, aren't there? And one of them is like, personally, how it affects us. So we can
yeah.
talk about it at a kind of group level. Whenever you get a community together, there's going to be kind of anxiety constraining what people are able to talk about, so power or whatever. But as you're saying, then when you're getting into doing something like a demonstration, then there's going to be fear of retribution in various kind of ways. So there's a personal level. Is that what you have to deal with it personally, or are you just happy? Do you not suffer from it at all personally, or?
Yeah, I think so, but I'm also a bit long in the tooth now, so
Uh-huh.
I kind of increasingly like, just get over yourself, and
Okay.
so on a personal level, I want constructive outcomes,
Hmm.
so um, yeah, I
So
think
you can declare those, you mean? You
yeah,
can kind of deal with it personally and then declare those, say that's really what I'm
mm,
trying to do. But and what then how again I'm interested in the practice. So what about when you're trying to bring a group together and you're knowing that there's fear there, what practice could you bring to that? Or do
um,
you bring to that?
I think what we try and do is just create openness, and for people to be as open and upfront with each other as they possibly can be.
Mm,
We do need, a kind of set of ground rules, which is people to be kind,
mm,
concise,
mm,
collective, that
mm,
kind of thing. There's not a single right, particular point of view, all of that kind of thing. And I think under pressure, people will peel off from time to time as well, and that's fine as well. So, this idea that you're going to get perfect consensus or unity under
mm,
pressure is not right. I think if you try and impose that, you end up going in a very, that's my criticism of political parties really, is the loyalty test that just kind of makes things very hollow very
mm,
quickly. So I think there is that, but it's what I was saying earlier about using art, food, music, the non-verbal, the non-head stuff as much as
mm,
possible. I think,
mm,
I'm into my theories and my ideas. I love all that stuff. But it's not for everyone. So it's like, how do you lead with the relational and the
mm,
non-verbal?
mm,
And I think people can really enjoy sharing experience together, sharing food together, telling stories together, trying to get a balance of um, not sort of trying to sort of do everything all at once as well, really. So the thing with the protests outside the town hall, we started that in January, where we just sat around in circles and talked. It was literally that. I was thinking, well, about February, where's this going? But the same group of people in a borough that's incredibly disempowered. We're outside the town hall 4 times over summer, and that never happens in Barking and Dagenham in that way. Never, never, never. And likewise, there've been lots of spin-offs and continuations of all of that. So it's sort of like, sometimes for me, it's about having no expectation, because actually things are happening that you won't know and you won't see, you'll only appreciate afterwards. And I'm not sure if this is true, but somebody told me this about bamboo, which, there's nothing for 5 years and suddenly it shoots up. So there's something going on, in terms of emergence there. And the result is for people to come together and share that time and space, really. And there's also the sort of you don't need to sort of pull things up to see if they're working all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say, use that kind of large word, emergence, but it's really about, as you're saying, about not having expectations, and then also kind of an acceptance of unpredictability. So as it sounds like, you sit around in circles for a long time, but then eventually somebody gets fed up with that, and something kind of gets proposed, and in the role you're in, and I think for many people leading in this way, you have to be kind of ready for that, but you're not forcing it. But then when it happens, you follow it. Follow the energy somehow.
Definitely. I mean, I am also, I click into the issue, solution, action. You've told me the issue, we've said this is it, now what do we do? And then we write it up. So there is that accountability. But yeah, it's the thing about community work as a cliche is about going at the pace of the slowest person in the room. And the balance between being directive and non-directive, etc., which I think you have to lead with your gut a little bit, and that kind of thing.
This is a little bit of a I mean, I don't want to bring too much of my own stuff in, but a little bit of a bugbear for me. Earlier on, you mentioned kind of ideas of system change and all of that kind of stuff, and I struggle a little bit with that, because sometimes I think that it's when people start to talk about systems, and there's a danger of kind of reifying the system, and there's a danger of thinking that somehow you're outside it and you can then change it from outside. Whereas what you're describing to me, and tell me if I'm right, is you're in it as well, and you and your colleagues are in it, and you're letting whatever emerges, and whatever you do is important. It is having influence, but it's not like you're trying to change the system. So I suppose I wonder what you think about that and whether the idea of systems change is helpful or unhelpful.
Yeah, I really react against the idea of systems change.
Just me too. I found somebody else who's with me. Great.
yeah. Only because I've sat in way too many meetings where people talk it, and you think, no, it's not going to happen, is it? And it also is not the words that people use when they're talking to each other. So I think authentic language as well. But I also, and likewise, I think the system as I experience it has got a vested interest in staying as it is, not changing. So I think I don't buy into the myth that there's lots of good people and good systems that are going to kind of all be part of the same set of wheels. No.
I mean that's there's something about that, isn't there, that accepting also that if comes back to this predictability thing, that if we can't really predict what's going to happen, there may be unfortunate outcomes from doing a demonstration as well as fortunate ones. So at one level, there's a real paradox, isn't there, that you're letting whatever emerges emerge, and you're kind of going with it, but you also can't, and you're holding on to, like, we're trying to make things better somehow. That's important too. So, but then unexpected outcomes can happen, can't they?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've had some great partnerships with statutory services that have, and some shocking ones, and with sometimes the same people or organisations, really. And it can be a certain amount of unpredictability and happenstance, but also I sort of feel we have to disrupt things rather than just walk into assumed consensus as well.
Yes.
And when we have disrupted and challenged, that's when we've been most authentic, just in terms of, and on the basis of, this is not a win for us. and I don't think it's a win for you either. This isn't going to work, and let's try and, we're experienced and able people. We've got resource. Let's try and not sleepwalk into a set of reactions because we're feeling institutionally fragile or scared, which is
Yeah.
for lots of very good reasons. Officers are losing their jobs,
Yeah.
austerity cuts, blah blah blah, all of that, and maybe they're getting leaned on by senior politicians, etc. You think, okay, completely understand what that means and why people mask up when they go to
Yes.
work.
Yes.
Forget the pandemic, they were wearing masks before.
Yes.
They're wearing masks after, really.
Yes.
And so it can be that. But no, I've got no. I take a deliberately contrarian and provocative approach to all of this stuff, which is I want residents leading, not following. My theory of change, such as it is it's only going to work if residents are leading. I don't believe in some magical pluralist moment, although, and also sometimes, if you aim high, things will shake out a bit better. We're not going to win everything, but we need a few wins, because once community groups and residents feel like they're winning, things change, really. But we're starting from a low base of fatalism, really, that people don't believe in that much. And you really need not naive hope, but you need that kind of fire in the belly and a few things to start moving for people, for stuff to happen, really. But yeah, systems change suggests to me that someone else has set the agenda, and that's not what community development needs to be about.
Yeah, and it's very good again to come back to that word community, actually. But I was listening to somebody the other day talking, and they were talking in the context of kind of climate change, but almost saying, it's climate change, we're not going to stop that system, kind of thing. But what we can do is build community. And and it sounds like partly what you're doing is every time you do one of these things and you're building relationships, and the relationships themselves are worth having, and the community itself is worth having. And we don't know what's going to come down the road this year, next year, whatever, but at least if you've built more community, that's a good thing. Is that partly what you're saying?
Yeah, no, 100%. I do a lot of work with the Red Cross, around resilience and that sort of thing. We've just had another fire, the Dagenham fire, which was, national news, cladding again. And I don't think the change that we need is going to come from the centre, not from the marketplace centrally, and not from the state, either the town hall or parliament. I think it's going to come from the margins, from the periphery, and to sort of flip around there. And I think it has to be involving of everyone, but somehow I think there needs to be a rediscovery of agency and capability of residents and people, just in simple ways outwards. And increasingly we've got the technology to do all of that. So for me, if someone has an uplifting, worthwhile conversation that looks outwards, then that's a win immediately, kind of thing. That's the seed. So it's kind of, on the one hand, the very simple and immediate, what's in front of us, and returning to that. The idea of community is absolutely nowhere in social policy. It's completely co-opted, incorporated, and nullified. And it's an abstract thing. You can debate forever what is community, but I think one of the things it's not government, and it's not for profit. Significantly, although social enterprise has got lots of potential. So because it's not seen, it's not respected, it's not present, I think creating those spaces, and those spaces are always temporary, to some extent. They usually get closed down. I'd love to own buildings and land, because that will give me a stake in perpetuity, so I'm really up for all of that. But it's a kind of emergent, fragile, quite ephemeral thing. Rather like life itself, he said, quite deeply, but all the more precious for that, really.
They're lovely. And yes, I really get that sense that community has been kind of co-opted, and in a way it's disappeared completely out of because of the way it's dealt with. That's right. Okay, so I'm really aware of your time. So I'm really happy to kind of wrap up in just a minute, but I just wanted to give you a last chance really to add in anything else you'd like to talk about in the realm of power or healthy power. Anything else you'd like to
Um,
add?
no, I mean, I think I just really enjoyed the conversation. I suppose the thing I'd say is financialisation. That was another long one, really, but it does feel that power is elsewhere, in terms of the kind of money that is global, the hot money that flies in and out of housing markets. And so we sometimes think the council has got control over planning. Well, not if you've got market viability, where effectively developers get to say how much profit they need to make, and that goes up and down according to circumstance. So I do think the financialization aspect of it, which is global and invisible and offshore, again, that's something that if we're having a broader debate, and I think sometimes we should do, because I don't want to bang on about, oh, so and so picked up some litter and that's a good thing. Obviously it is. It's also having an eye to, just as climate change is a global thing, it's not going to respect national borders or borough borders or whatever. Likewise, I think we need to look at where finance has gone, where tech and data is going, for the good and the bad. But yeah, I'm just really struck by the power of finance and the complete lack of power of politicians, central and local, really.
All the way down, all the way down to the
Yeah,
people
yeah,
on
yeah.
the street who are trying to cope with all of that. No, it's fascinating, and it just strikes me what a difficult job you're doing. And thank you for for doing it. I mean, just difficult, particularly because there is that kind of global aspect to it, but then you're trying to have real conversations with real people who are dealing with real day-to-day issues, and that's hard to kind of balance that, isn't that? And do that. So I'm very much admiring of the work you're doing. So thank you very much. That's great. Love to get you back again in maybe a year's time and see how it's progressing.
Sure,
If that would be all right.
definitely,
Would that be
definitely up for
okay?
that.
And
Yeah,
yeah, thanks ever so much, Matt. It's been really good fun. And for the rest of everybody out there, we will be in touch and post some more episodes soon. But thanks again, Matt. Great to have you.
great, brilliant, Pete. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.